Sit down, shut up, and pay attention.
Damn!
This is the Rants of Izzo Show with your hosts, Dominic Izzo, from porn to politics. We touch every third rail we can find. You might want to put your headphones on so your mom can't hear this. It's been called the most entertaining 60 minutes on the internet, and it starts now. Let's do this.
All right, this is the first of the Rants of Izzo conversations we're having on Spreely Media. So if you do watch or pay attention to us Monday through Friday on the Rants of Izzo show here, we are heavy political. We're a stream of consciousness. We talk about everything that's on the table. But for a conversation like this, we want to have the real meat and potatoes of important stuff, to me at least, and hopefully the audience finds it as well too. This is going to be great for me. My first guest is somebody very close to me. It's a friend, a mentor, somebody who I trust as one of the most leading voices in something that we don't pay attention to much, or we just glance over greatly, which is our health, right? So many of us we glaze over our health. We don't pay attention to it, or we just, I'm going to do this and that, blah, blah, blah. But I want to have a conversation today with Valerie Sayre from Nutrition Connection Balance. Great mentor, great leader. I'm going to let Val, what I think I want to do with you is I want to have you give the 30,000-foot view of who you are, because I'll never be able to do it justice. But we're going to talk today about everything from nutrition to wellness to hormones to the essential quality of life content. And I just couldn't think of a better guest to start this series off on. So number one, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really great to be with you and the audience, and hopefully we'll have some fun and really instigate some good conversation. You know, you asked about my background. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian. I also am a licensed dietitian nutritionist. That takes precedence over other nutrition types of education and background. I have a degree in nutrition and food science. I did a medical internship at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. But, you know, it's really what I've learned with working with people over the years, family, friends, myself, athletes, that's really gotten me to where I think people just don't realize how much their body and their quality of life really makes a difference. So then I added on pharmacy, and I've added on advanced exercise. I've been a Reiki master for over 22 years. I'm a yogi, so a lot of different things, but I wear a lot of hats. But my specialty is absolutely wellness, and I'm extremely passionate about it, as you know. And, you know, I love to help stimulate thought with people so that they start thinking about what could really they obtain with their body, whether it's how they look, how they feel, wellness, quality of life, a good libido, any of those things, because they all make us really enjoy every day.
One of the things that where I gravitated towards you, I mean, we met over 10 years ago, and I came from the gym, you know, the meathead. It's Monday, it's chest day, everybody's got to do whatever. And I can't say, I like to say that I'm open-minded, but in a lot of ways I'm not. So when I listen to anybody, and especially from an opposing gender, to tell me how to eat, how to work out, I of course I shut down, but the way that you approach how you convey information, it's always non-threatening, and it's from a non-ego base. You never say my way is right. And then what usually winds up happening is those of us who pay attention to you realize her way is right. I want to start with, in a day and age where everything is at our fingertips in the quickest flash of an eye, with so much conflicting and opposing information, where do people start when it comes down to starting to navigate health? And I would like to think that a majority of the people who are going to be paying attention to this conversation they're not in their 20s, right? They're people who have lived life, maybe poisoned themselves with food that they didn't know about. Their hormones are out of whack. They're aging. They live life, cortisol, stress, all this. So when we go to the social media, and you got guru so-and-so and expert so-and-so, it's overwhelming. What do you offer from either a physical standpoint or an emotional standpoint? Basically, if somebody's coming in the door to you and says, hey, listen, I saw your stuff online, but I'm overwhelmed. What do I do? How do you start people on the journey of finding their health?
Yeah, well, you know, the first thing is I ask a lot of questions, and I think questions help provoke that thought process that helps you determine what is best for you while asking for guidance from somebody that's good at what they do, right? You have good skills. So you ask the right person the right question. So, so one of the things that I really promote and what I think makes me different is number one, I am very open minded. I think that we have forgotten two things that are extremely important. So when I talk to somebody, whether they're brand new or they think they know a lot about wellness and integrative health and fitness and so on, is number one, we're all individuals. That's what really got me into the field. I have two sisters. I grew up a certain way, but I was nothing like them. And so even that got me thinking at an early age, why do we treat everyone like they're the same? As far as, let's say, nutrition or exercise. And that's just ridiculous. Down from our fingerprints onto our personality to where we live, it changes. So, one of the things that really sets me apart is I totally believe in individualization. That's why all diets work. They do. But which one's the right one for your biochemistry, for what your goal is? How about for the time of your life? It's different when you're 40 maybe than when you're 60. And some people, it's the opposite. Actually, life a lot of times gets better as someone gets older because they have the time freedom, they have the money, and they do want to really focus on some kind of performance or level of change in their body or strength or whatever it may be. So first is I really ask, what are their top concerns? If you had three goals, what would they be as far as your health, as far as a symptom concern or something preventatively, or whatever the top three symptoms or concerns are. And the second thing that is really not unique, but I think we have got to go back to is nobody has common sense anymore, Dominic. I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, the thing that people want to know all these fancy things, but if you don't have the core things down, from enough sleep to drinking water to having enough fruits and vegetables to having enough lean protein, you are not going to have the same results typically unless you are just genetically blessed, which of course I hope some of you have that because I do not come from that end of life. But, when we look at that, I really ask a lot of questions, look at individualization, as well as really trying to teach people to come back to some common sense, because again, you can't have a special just herb fix everything if you're sleeping like crap, if you're drinking constantly, all those different things, I'm a proponent of unless someone is at their end of the life and they need to change something or there's a big emergency, I think that we can really most of the time do the 80-20 rule, 80% clean, 20% fun, but that 80% clean needs to be based on your goals and your individual biochemistry. So I think that's the key that we miss. So
I want to take a step back for a second and I want to establish your level of expertise. You're not somebody who just does, you practice what you preach. Can you talk about your competitive athlete? You still are extremely active gym wise. So can we start there? You train and you are associated with professional athletes, Olympic athletes. So I want to start there for a second. You just aren't somebody who hands out information and based on that. You put yourself through the same crucible of fire. Can you talk about your journey with your personal health and wellness?
Yeah, sure. I think that's the important thing, right? Because we all want to have that personal touch as well as, again, that individualization. So it really, what really kind of drove me was to be able to change my body physically, mentally, spiritually, and or biochemically when I want to. And I have learned how to do that. Now, I do not find that it's easy for me, but I can do it. So when we look at, some of the things that I look at, I was in an exercise and pregnancy study with my two biological children. So I was studied at Metro Health Hospital and I had to go in and exercise 3 days a week. And, they looked at everything. And one of the things that they found is they found that exercisers that are moms have smarter children, healthier children, as well as, of course, a lower body fat and a better pregnancy and all those things. So I fit all those rules as well as my children, except for the weight gain. I came from a family that is pretty much obese on both sides, as well as pretty much every medical issue you can think of. And I just decided at an early age I wanted to be different. So when I was in high school, I over-exercised because I had no idea what to do. And I loved food. I came from a family that had 20 tables of food if we had a family party, So I just learned how to offset it. But as I got older, I started to see how things really changed. And I didn't like it. I wanted to absolutely get what I wanted. And so it took me a lot of things. That's why I added on other degrees and other certifications. But it was really with the training as well as paying attention to my own journey history that made the difference. So I always test myself constantly. If I bring in a new test, I might use it 3 times in 4 months, where someone only needs to test once or twice a year, just so I can see, how does my life impact it? How does my food impact it? How does, if I'm traveling, impact it? So those kind of things. But the exercise and the athletic stuff was really a no-brainer for me. And that's because typically why I love working with people that exercise, love the gym. And I don't care if it's martial art, if it's a weight training, if it's a triathlon, if it's a hammer thrower. It's that they are disciplined. That means they are so laser focused that a lot of times they're missing that edge of nutrition and performance and individuality so that they can get injured less. So they could have, 2 extra seconds on their swim, so they could run faster or hit a baseball better, and so that's one of the things that makes athletes so unique is they already have a skill, but it's the discipline, and they want to have good performance. And even there, the two people are not going to be the same. So I've done 3 full marathons after my children were born, and I've done 2 natural bodybuilding shows. And the bodybuilding shows were by far the most. I like walking and running and jump roping and all those things, but I love lifting weights. I still do. I'm 57, I'll be 58 this year, and I still love the gym. I go to the gym every day. I mean, I'll have to make myself take a day off, Dominic, because it feels so darn good. And I really do it because of how I can get into the zone, so that as a busy practitioner and mom of 5 and all these other things, right, that I do and other business that I run, I want to make sure that I can get up out of a chair, that I don't have aches and pains, and that I feel strong all the time. So, exercise is one of those gifts that we can all do. I don't care where you are. When I go, even I just helped one of our children move to back to St. Pete. And, I made sure I got a hotel that had a gym, because I knew we were not, with moving, going to be able to go to an actual gym, make that time based on a weekend trip. So I just made sure that the gym had, the hotel had a gym that was good enough for me to get a good, 45-minute workout in instead of an hour or 2 workout. So, exercise is something everyone can do. And there's so many medical and internal and empowerment, physical, so many advantages. I could go on and on just about exercise, so hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. And I want to take that direction for a second, because I understand and I know firsthand the synergistic relationship between moving your body in motion, when a body in motion stays in motion. But I've noticed over the last decade that, you can't live. The younger me would do a weigh-in before a wrestling meet, and then, hey, all right, we lost the 5 pounds we needed. Now let's go to McDonald's before we eat, before we have a match. Yeah. And then, so at 17 years old, you're eating 3 triple cheeseburgers, and you're still functioning. What I would think back then, fine, air quotes, fine. And I always say, I think for years, man, what happens if I actually ate properly and fueled myself and didn't poison myself? Well, now at almost 50, I was discussing this with someone the other day. Working out is no longer a passion. It's a must. It's on the list of things that have to be done, because I refuse to live a quality of life where someone's pushing me in a wheelchair down the road. I want to ask a general question. For people like me who abused their bodies with poor nutrition, and now we're finding ourselves, the mind and body are not in synergistic alignment. I can't go to the gym and I don't feel good about it. I don't like it. I have a feeling that has things to do with my mind, the hormones, the food I'm putting in. Is it possible to kind of hit a reset button to where, if I cleaned my diet up, can our bodies start to rejuvenate to where I can be 57 and then I feel great again? Or did people like me do so much damage that you're not gonna physically enjoy stuff anymore, because your body mentally, hormonally has been so much abused? It's just too late. Can we hit the reset button by changing habits later on in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty. That's why our bodies are freaking amazing, to be honest, is that you can change that physiology and keep things unexpressed. I mean, we can't stop aging, we can only slow it down, but we can really regenerate tissue, cells, and bodies. Typically it takes 3 to 4 months per se for red and white blood cells to turn over, 1 to 2 years for most of the tissue, and up to 8 to 10 years for a lot to change, where we really have turned over everything. So, there's lots of studies as well as what I see, and it depends how far and how fast you want to go. Sometimes what happens is people have a bump in the road and then they're all in. But even when someone has, let's say, a medical issue, what I see is they're all in, but they do it for 6 months and they go right back to what they were doing. So that's why I'm more of a proponent of that individualization, because a lot of people, if they see objective data, that they see that their inflammatory markers are high, even if they don't have aches and pains. And I say, this is the number one cause of every disease you can think of. Let's work on this first through changing. Maybe, we go through a diet history and maybe we just need to say, okay, you're eating red meat every day. Would you be willing to eat it 3 times a week? And then eventually over the next 2 years, go down to 2 times a month. And you say yes or no. If you say, nope, I'm not willing to do that, I say, okay, let's look at the next thing you might be willing to do, based on what your biochemistry or your goals are. So, when people are all in, they typically will do everything and then they just quit and go back to all their old habits. So what I say is it's really good to get objective data and some testing and to actually make a few changes. And usually I say start with some of the easier things unless you're in trouble. And like if you want your energy to be better at the gym, and that is something that is absolutely important to you, from working to your daily quality of life, then we say, okay, let's look at your adrenal glands. Let's make sure they're appropriately, working. And then if they're not, let's treat that. And I'll tell you the top 3 or 4 things that might affect your energy and your strength at the gym, as well as that quality that you feel at home and when you wake up in the morning and throughout the day. And then, you might say, Valerie, I'm not going to give up coffee. I'm not going to give up my cigars. I'm not going to, okay, well, how about these 3 things? Are you willing to do these 3? See if you feel, see when you feel better. I'll say when, because rarely do I have anybody, if they're willing to follow some directions, even if it's not all of them, they absolutely have a change where they are noticing they're feeling better, that their quality at the gym and their lifting and just whatever it is that they want is absolutely better. And that gets someone interested. Then they say, you know what, I said I wasn't ready, going to give this up or go down, but you know what, tell me again why that's important, because I'm starting to feel so darn good, I might be willing to do another step. Because I have people tell me all the time, Dominic, they are absolutely not going to change this, or this. I don't argue with them. I say, okay, I may not be able to get the results you're looking for, but I could get partial results. Let's see how you feel. And then if you buy into that from based on your markers and how you feel, would you be open to talking about a few more things? And sometimes it's amazing that, how someone has to do a lot of things to get results. Some people only have to do a few. That comes back to the genetics, luck, so many different things. So I tell people, don't ever give up. I don't care what age you are. You absolutely can obtain a lot of things that you want. Even when I work with end stage of life, when someone, let's say, is in hospice, but they don't, they're miserable. They want to finish some business. They want to finish talking to their loved ones. They don't want to just lay in bed. They want to do some traveling. They want to be with people they love or doing experiences that they love. I'll say, okay, well, here's some things that we can do that might help the quality. We're not necessarily looking to reverse this because that's sometimes way too far. But even then, do you think it matters? It sure does. So it really depends on what the person's willing to do, and then how bad do they feel? Because often it's when people feel bad that they're willing to do things,
We live in a society where, you want that magic pill, or you want to be told just what to do. And one of the things about you is always balance, right? It's in the title of your website. And that's our relationship has always been that way. I'm an extremist, black and white, and then you fill in the gaps. It's a good mentorship. That's why you're a mentor of mine, because it's got the good. Here's the leash. I'm tugging back a little bit. Here's a different perspective. When it comes to others who are in that same spot where, all right, I'm overwhelmed. Dr. So-and-so says I got to eat all carnivore. Somebody says I got to eat all fruit, got to eat all, and the extremes back and forth. What I want to know is, with your also passion for Reiki and energy and mindset, if we do have a majority of people, sadly, a lot of people out there it's a weak mindset. We have dumbed ourselves down.
Yeah.
How self-defeating is it to be a person who is, Valerie, I'm coming in, I'm turning the reins all over to you. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. When you don't have the proper mindset, energetically wise, are you just spinning your wheels then? Is it a lost cause, or do we need to have those two things completely in alignment to see real change?
Yeah, I think, it's helpful always, the more you have things aligned, right? You get decent amount of sleep, you have a decent amount of friendships, you have a decent amount of money, you have a job that you like somewhat or love like we do, then hopefully, you have enough of those baseline groundings that it doesn't seem like so extreme. But let's say, like you said, you just say, Valerie, I want to do everything. And I'll say, even there, I'll ask you a lot of questions. So, even with my practice, I only take a very small part of brand new patients that are one-on-one, because most people are absolutely not interested or willing in testing every few months to keep fine-tuning things over 2-3 years to get it where they're at high level internally, externally, mentally, physically, and so on. But a lot of people will do a clinic. So it might be, for example, let's say, you say, okay, yeah, I say I'm all in, but, Valerie, I'm not going to do this, this, or this. I say, all right, well, let's start with the things that absolutely are foundational that can change what you do for the rest of your life, even if you don't talk to me again. Usually people are all ears there. I'll have patients that say fall off because they get sick or they have 4 or 5 emergencies at once, which really stinks. It's life, right? But when they come back, they'll say, I want you to know I never stopped my vitamin D, my essential fatty acids, or my Juice Plus. I made sure I drank water every day. I didn't exercise every day because I was caretaking, and then I had this happen and this happened. But you know what? Still, my markers aren't so bad. I didn't go down the tubes. I was able to get through that. Now I'm willing to go a little farther again. Could we get me back on track with looking at my adrenals, my stress hormones? Could we look at, I'm willing to make some other changes now. I'm even willing to go to the grocery store now, versus just, going to fast food and so on. So, each person is different, but I really think it's part of digging deep of what you want. And I think people, again, as you said, tend to be all or nothing, and it just rarely works. There's absolutely those people that the all or nothing does work well. Someone that's has a major health event. Sometimes they just know they've got to do it. Or sometimes if someone has an addiction to food, let's say, they know they can't do balance. They've try to do moderation. It's up and down. So each person has got to decide how badly they want something, and I don't care if it's the foggy mental, if it's the performance, if it's body fat that they feel frumpy, whatever it is. There's never not a reason to start somewhere, and if someone says, I'm all in, I want to do it all. I say, okay, but I still want to know your top 3 goals, because I want to make sure if I don't have you connected to something that's important to you, not what I think, what's important to you. And I don't care if it's even something that wouldn't be on my top 5 list. My job is still to get you what you want, because then you're going to buy in, you're going to have something that feels better, and then you're going to be more open, most likely, to making other changes. And that's the fun part. I mean, I can tell you so many stories of people that, I had one lady that pounded on the desk and said, don't ever tell me I'm going to, I'm not going to drink milk again, and I'm going to give up my alcohol every other day. And now she just laughs all these years later, because she's like, I never even think about that anymore, other than at a wedding or something fun, but it's not part of her daily life anymore. So I think we underestimate the power of change. I don't care how small or how big. But of course, if people are aligned, Dominic, of course they're going to be more successful. But don't let that stop you from doing something that starts that wheel, of change.
Do you support the impulsive concept then to go in deep off one end if it's a start? Meaning, I did a couple of months ago. I was very dissatisfied with where I was because I was experiencing acid reflux almost every night, and I started to do the math. I'm going, well, I'm eating heavy carbohydrates before I go to bed, and then it was, I don't like eating carbohydrates during the day anymore because of the insulin crash. It's like, wow, 2 o'clock in the afternoon comes. This is a legitimate problem, and it's so I saw my mood go south, and everything was horrible. So I went all in with that carnivore diet, and immediately it was a night and day change. In 24 hours, there was no acid reflux. I slept great through the night, all of this. But after about the 6-week mark, yeah, it was a balance of what do I want to weigh, what do I want to keep, what do I want to get rid of, and I started to notice, well, there's no bloat. That was a good thing. You slept better, your mood is better. Yeah. But did you notice you lost like 20 pounds off your bench press because you're not putting fuel in your body? So for me, it went extreme to then frustrated to falling off the horse. And then it took 3 cycles of doing that diet for me before I went, let's manage properly. What are you consuming? When are you consuming it? So is there any bonus or benefit to somebody getting frustrated, jumping all in, and then taking an extreme measure on something? I don't care if they eat salads 24/7 or carnivore, but just to start that process, is that a mentally and emotionally a good thing to do, or are they going to do more damage? Because for me, it took about 6 months to start figuring things out. I'll tell you flat out, I won't call you because I don't need to hear from you. I told you so, and I don't like that. That's the stubborn side of me. But for somebody else, is that the wrong decision to make, jumping all in for something they're not very well educated on?
Yeah, I think it depends. And I hate to say that because, I like to give a distinct answer, but there's very few things that you can have just a yes or no answer for. So I'm going to make it as simple as I can, but hopefully applicable to everybody. That number one, sometimes it's good because you get a result, right? And if you get a result, okay, what I was doing wasn't working, right? So that can be motivating, However, if it's a fad, and you don't know how to transition, because I always say, are you going to do that the rest of your life then, no matter what? And you say, yeah, I am, Valerie, because you know what? I liked how I feel. I liked the weight I lost. But then let's say 2 years down the road, and we look at your cholesterol is 300 and your calcification score is 200. And I say, well, that means 6 months or less, you're very high risk for any kind of heart event. And so, sometimes it can be motivating as long as you can learn how to transition. The second thing is that, again, if someone has an eating disorder, or again, they have addictions where they binge on and off, that doesn't help, right? Because then it's just, you feel even worse about yourself when you go off, and then usually you gain more or have worse results. And I think the last thing is everyone's biochemistry is different. That's why I'm not a fan of fad diets. It's because, what might be good for me, let's say I did a carnivore diet, let's say like you did, and believe me, it would not be pretty. Because genetically, I have a propensity for having fats and carbohydrates being very bad for me. So a better diet for me is lots of lean protein and a lot of vegetables with low to moderate carbs. So, because I know that from genetic tests, I know that from getting into bodybuilding shows and not doing crazy stuff, right? Really doing it, and I hate the word natural, but I did it the right way, where I still had to take polygraphs and urine tests, no any kind of performance enhancing. And again, everybody's different. I just chose to go that route. That again, it depends on the person. So I think there's some value there sometimes because you realize that you can change, right? It's sort of like a smoker. Why can some people just say, okay, I'm going to quit smoking and that's the end of it? And other people have to try 100 times or go down from, 25 cigarettes to 20. And by 3 years, they're down to 10. And then 10 years, they're down to 2. I don't know, that's where I don't think we're usually willing to look at ourselves closely enough of what makes us do the things we do, and a lot of times it's just unhappiness, to be honest, with anything, and then we all clutch on to something that makes us feel good, and food is something that's difficult because it's the only thing you're never going to give up your whole life. You're always going to have to eat, and so I think it's coming to peace with it, but also realizing you can change and you're always stronger than you think. But being motivated to what goal you want and then trying it. And then even then, when people say, I know it worked, but I'm not happy. I can't have the same social life. I can't travel the same. I say, okay, well, why is that important? Is it really that you feel better or is it really a social aspect? Then we figure out how to fit it in, without it affecting their health or their markers. So I think there's value to it sometimes. I think we don't transition well from it. And that's the same when I have a cancer patient that goes all in to, all plant-based and all, lean protein that are plant-based, and they, watch every bit of chemicals. They test everything, and, they go to the gym every day. And then 6 months later, I'd say 97% of people or more, they don't do it again. So how does that help them not get cancer back? It doesn't make sense to me. It makes more sense to make 2 or 3 changes, whether it takes them a month to 6 months, get the results, and then keep adding on unless there's an emergency or someone is willing to really jump in and then learn how to transition that fits in with what they're looking for,
The food game, it's horrible.
I know.
If you want to eat right, it's like, what's the joke? Whole Foods is whole paycheck. For the first time ever, it was 2 weeks ago. I go to the grocery store and I'm like, okay, like my addiction is peanut butter and jam sandwiches, not jelly, but jam, right? And I don't have them as often as I would like to. If I could, I could have them every day, but I have maybe once a month now. And I'm like, all right, I want to get bread, but let's look at the right bread. I picked up a label and I'm like, let's look. And I could not believe it's not flour, water, salt, and yeast. It is a 20 or 30 ingredients. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the bakery section and check this out. Same thing. So for frustration, I went, I'm doing this myself. And I started baking bread. Flour, water, salt, and yeast. No bloat, no insulin crash. Are we taught to fear carbs wrongly or irresponsibly? Because I wanted to see how that worked, and I took a heaping chunk of the bread I baked, not once, a couple days in a row. So never a crash, never any bloat. Are we at a losing battle of grocery shopping especially for people who have families, they're on a budget, they're kids? How can people get their health back when it's so overwhelming and the poisons are stacked up against us in everything we eat?
Yeah. It's first you're aware, right? As soon as you actually, because people say all the time, well, bread is healthy for me. I get sprouted, I get whole wheat, I get Ezekiel bread. I'm like, still look at the label, just like you did. So I always say, that remember, fruits, vegetables, lean protein are going to be generally, right, pretty clean. Raw nuts and seeds, pretty clean, nuts, that's it. You don't see 14 other ingredients. You can, so you got to still look at the label if it has a label. So staying with more whole foods is the first goal. And then the second goal is finding out what foods you like, and the less processed, the better. So what you said with the bread is really interesting, because what I see all the time is I'll ask people, like I have a lot of patients that are, especially living in, Illinois for a long time, that had homes in Illinois and in Mexico. And they would be, let's say, type 2 diabetic, and they could not eat any bread. They couldn't eat tortillas. They couldn't eat even that own some Mexican restaurants at their own restaurant, because their blood sugar as well as other markers would be terrible. But they'd go back home in their smaller towns where they're rolling out the corn, they're rolling things, they're making the actual tortillas. They could have 2 or 3 and their blood sugar would not be different, would not go up. So what we see is that the more processed, the more our body doesn't recognize it, period. That is absolutely true. It's the same when people go to Europe.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that. Please continue. Yes.
Yeah. I have a lot of athletes that live in multiple places, and a lot of times they're over in Europe training or getting ready for competition, or people that travel. 2 of our kids are in Europe. One's in Sweden, one's in Denmark. And the thing is that how come when you go to any restaurant there, you don't go to Spain, you don't go to France, you don't go to Germany, they don't say, do you need gluten or dairy free? I've never been anywhere in Europe where they ask me that. And you'll see they'll have even a croissant for breakfast. But if you go to Spain and have a croissant for breakfast and you buy 5 croissants at the local bakery, that's open on the street, and you tried to hoard them, by the 3rd day, you can't even bite into a croissant because it doesn't have all the fillers. It doesn't have all the bad ingredients. It's really fresh. Same with the bread. So it's not that you should still overeat it, but when the less processed, the better. Our body does not recognize processed food, and the older we get, the worse it is, because we've had accumulation of toxins. We've had accumulation of different, things that are additives in foods, and our cells are not releasing as much enzymes to break down that food, like with reflux. It's not, why do most people say, well, I ate the same when I was 20 and now I'm in my 40s or 50s and now I'm having reflux? Well, because we don't produce the same level of enzymes. We've had more salts, we have more toxins that have built up. So there's reasons why we want to have less processed food, and the less ingredients, typically the better. So it's just absolutely true. So it's carbs give us energy with glycogen. So like when we work with an athlete, I always say, even if they want to get very lean, the key is after their workout, have carbs and protein in an equal ratio, unless they're, really, a long endurance kind of athlete, then it might be a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. But you need that carbohydrate to be broken down into glycogen so you have energy stores in your muscles for your next workout. So, and of course, there's always exceptions where I have people that are on more of a ketogenic diet and they exercise fine, so it is, again, different for each person,
You said something years ago, and I'm going to paraphrase this, and
Sure.
it was in a presentation you gave about how the body recognizes what we need, meaning I think you gave an example like how many of you could eat endlessly a bag of chips or
Right.
a whole serving of fries, and we're like, all of us could, you could have more.
Yeah.
And then you would say something like, well, how many of you ever had a banana and then you've craved a second banana? We're like, no. And the analogy you gave us was because the body recognizes that you're getting the proper nutrients from that, but in this other food, you're not getting anything. So the body's like more.
Yep.
Is that what that was? Your body identify, hey, I've got what I need out of this, so that's good, and it's an endless pit for the.
Yeah, it's a different level of nutrition. So that nutrition density, is it's same like with a bag of carrots, right? When someone's on a diet and they'll measure their carrots, but they'll eat 14 Oreos. I'm like, come on, are you really going to eat a whole bag of carrots, 2-3 bags? I've never heard of anyone doing it ever. It's just not going to happen. So when you have nutrient density, that means for the amount of calories, there's a ton of nutrition. You're going to be more satiated. Your brain is also, even your blood sugar and your brain is going to have an even level of serotonin. Part of the goal when we're looking at blood sugar, when we're looking at emotional status and mental clarity, is we want blood sugar to be like this, right? We don't want blood sugar high and then super low. Same with hormones. We don't want hormones jacked up, like with pellets and some of these new things I'm seeing come back 25 years later, jacked up, and then they come down. It makes no sense. Anybody that's been around, let's say, a diabetic that has blood sugar super high, they're mean as heck. They're crabby. They feel bad, right? And then if they go too low, what are they? The same thing. They can bear their sleep, right? They feel mean. They're tired. So we don't want those fluctuations. We're going to have some. I mean, that's normal based on exercise and daily patterns, but we don't want extremes. So when you have nutrient-dense food, especially with a lot of nutrition and carbs and protein together, or if you're doing more of a higher fat diet or a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, then I say just make sure you have some carbs with it. And if you're afraid of carbs, then see again, what your body needs. Do a few vegetables with the protein, or do lean, good fats with a carbohydrate. So you see what works. And of course, I go further than that, with testing patients. So I can say, you may feel good with this, but look this is what's going to happen, or this is what your biochemistry is already showing. A high inflammatory marker and a high LDL and a lipid size, that type of thing. So, you may feel good and you may lose weight, but you're still at risk for a cardiovascular event. So what's important to you?
Yeah,
I've had people tell me they don't care.
What you are not doing is you are not fear mongering food, right?
No,
and that's where most of today's gurus online are. You'll get like I'm not knocking on, but it comes to mind, Dr. Paul Saladino, who and they flip. Will say, I've been on carnivore forever, and he'll go in a grocery store, pick up a stalk of broccoli, and say, broccoli is BS, and throws it out. And now he comes out and he does a massive long explanation with, was it Thomas DeLauer, and says, I was wrong. And now I do 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, but it's from a fruit-based diet. So the connection between fearing food and alienating, because again, I had thought about what am I robbing my body of nutrition-wise if I'm not putting in the proper the proper nutrition that I need, right? If it's only meat, eggs, butter, whatever, what am I robbing?
Right.
I want to get your opinion. I want to have go a little bit of a different direction and talk about some of these fads that are out. The cold plunge, which is brand new. When I was young, I'll never forget, I was in my 20s, and a bunch of us at work were talking about how, you should every single day you should have freezing cold ice water, because that water is then going to have to be heated up by your stomach to burn calories. Oh, that was great. Then you fast forward 5 years. No, you should never drink freezing cold water because your organs are going to be shocked. Well, now the latest thing is the ice bath. What are your opinions on this, athletes who are going ice bath every day, first thing in the morning, and feeling like they're insane?
Yeah, I think, again, things come back around, right? I laugh because when you were saying that, it made me think about how I became a registered dietitian. It was because when I moved away from home, I graduated a year early, moved down to Florida on my own, and then I had to find a job. So when I wasn't happy with the job, I decided then that finally I was going to go to school. And I went to school for nutrition because every single book I read said something opposite. I'm like, there's got to be some science to this besides individuality. So it's the same thing, is that, when someone says something changes, aren't you irritated by that? I say, no, that's called science. That's where we add on. But we always got to take science and individualize it to the person's biochemistry. That's where it's, important. So with the ice bath, athletes have been doing it forever. My husband, was a decathlete, and he did ice baths back then. He's 63 now. So it's newer to the public, but I'd say to athletes, it's been there. So they do find that, for some people, it can help with depression. Some people, it can help with, stiffer muscles as well as recovery. But do I think that I have to go plunge every morning to feel good? I do not do that. I hate being cold. That's why I live in Florida again. Today is, 60s. It's too cold for me. I like it 80 and above. So, even when it says, well, you should cold plunge too. I've got a hot tub, but you should cold plunge. I'm not going to do it. Now, I'm not saying I'm not ever going to do it. Maybe when I get older or something and I want to do it, but right now it's not something I would enjoy. So, and I don't feel tired. I don't feel depressed. So I think there is value to it, but like anything, it's been around for a long time. I think it's just more now out in the public. So regular people that aren't professional athletes are learning about it, and there is some value to it.
Let's look at the carnivore diet and keto diet. They seem to me very reminiscent of the Atkins diet, which was big in the 80s. The general thoughts on those? They're the big fad now.
Yeah, it depends. So, again, there are people that do a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet and all meat diet, and they do very well. And part of the reason that a lot of people do very well with that, not just weight loss, but they'll even see their blood sugar go down, their insulin get better, their lipids will not go up. That's because they're more genetically prone to have problems with glucose, insulin, prediabetes, usually that kind of thing. However, someone like me that genetically has a problem with too many carbs and fats, that would be a terrible diet for me. Even if I get thinner, my labs look bad. And, and again, as you get older, you better care about it because that does increase your risk of the top 10 diseases. So I think, it's been around a long time. And for some people, it is very effective. But if you're not testing your markers, that's where I get concerned. And there are some people when they do, especially all in, 26 grams of carbs or under, and they're exercising. There are some people that have problems with depression that can make it worse, not better. And that's because a lot of times they need a certain amount of carbohydrates to produce serotonin, dopamine, and some of the other pathways. So I think like anything, am I against it? I would say no, but I'd say, is it the right diet for you? And again, and most people, right, are going by just how they feel, or they're going by their weight. And I always say, if you saw over 20,000 patients, and, and some of them, even the first time they came in, they had cancer 3 times, but they look great. How you look on the inside is not what's going on the inside. So.
Hormones, your area of expertise.
Yes.
So many of us, what do? We hit 40, go to the doctor. All right, I'm going to put you on testosterone. I know that I don't know about women's hormones, but I know that women need to get them checked as well too.
Mm-hmm.
How is it just, you know what, you're a male, you're going to hit 40, your testosterone is going to drop, it's game over? Or can our nutrition balance that without having to do testosterone? You see all these claims out all the way from go out naked every morning and lay with your butt up in the air to the sun, and it's going to increase your testosterone 200% or X, Y, and Z. Are hormones controllable, or is it just it's a product of aging? It's depleted, and you're going to start shrinking into the oblivion, and just got to accept it.
Yeah, I think that, and hormones are definitely my passion. When I started running a compounding pharmacy and I found out so much that I didn't know, even there as a young woman, I was floored. I'm like, why didn't I learn this when I was 10 years old? Seriously, of how much it impacts our bodies. People don't even know what hormones are. They're peptides or proteins that give signals to every single thing in our body. So when we talk about testosterone, for an example, I can have a man that has lower testosterone in his 30s because of poor diet, overstress, maybe genetics. Often their adrenals are burned out. So if we get their adrenals better, they don't need testosterone. I have people in their 40s and 50s that need testosterone even when everything else is beautiful. And I have other men in my practice that are in their 80s that we're still using an herb and or addressing it with nutrition and just baseline supplementation, and their testosterone is still great. So it is so interesting how it is so different, but there is a relationship to people that have delayed needs for hormones, unless there's a very big genetic propensity for it. Like if your dad and your, let's say, brother and your uncle all were, on testosterone in their 30s, there might be, again, something genetic. But what I do find is that people that have some of those baseline things, right, again, decent water, decent diet, I didn't say perfect, not obese, exercise 3 times a week or more, have their vitamin D, not take vitamin D, have their levels in the ideal levels, male 65 to 100, most females 75 to 100. It's considered 30 is considered normal, or 30 and under is considered low. That's ridiculous. It's a hormone. So if people have a better diet and somewhat balance in their body, I find that most of those people have delayed needs for hormones unless there's been a medical hit. There's a lot of prescriptions that cause a depletion in hormones, and then certainly chemo, radiation, things like that definitely deplete the hormones. But the thing that we're missing that's different so much is if I even just think about every 10 years, there is such a difference where I would say stress is probably 75% of why depletions happen earlier, besides really crappy nutrition. And again, I have a lot of people that they look good, they're great weight, but they have horrible nutrition. And those people still feel bad. They're still having medical issues. It's just no one asks them about their diet because they're not overweight or obese. So I think it's,
that is that cortisol? Because it was 2 years ago, I made a conscious decision. I got so irritated with Facebook. I said, I'm taking a month off. So I took 6 weeks off of all social media, did not change my diet at all. And I had videos and pictures, the bloat versus the 6 months later where you could see my abs for the first time in years. And people are like, oh my God, what's your diet? This, and I said, I didn't change anything. I 100% believe that I was so stressed out from nonstop doom scrolling online. The world is ending. You're political this, my political that, all that, that when I got that away from my brain, things changed. Is that where we need to start? I know that what you think, it's like your thoughts create your environment and your action. When all of this starts, is that the number one thing that we have to look at, is what we're consuming with our mind? Because is that a cortisol thing? And then no matter how good you eat and work out, you're never going to change because of how your cortisol is and all that?
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. Cortisol is in the same pathways as blood sugar, insulin, carbohydrates, all of that. But it's a stress hormone, and we need both stress hormones. The top 2 adrenal hormones are cortisol, as you mentioned, and DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. And so there's 2 main adrenal hormones, but our adrenals are these glands located above the kidneys that respond to stress. And they need to work properly because they can provide 30, 50, 60% of our hormones, even before we get older or hit menopause or andropause or perimenopause. So the thing is what we see is probably when I first started in the field, I would say 10% of people had their adrenals out of whack. Seriously, it was that not common. Now it's almost every person. When I have someone test for the first time, they have normal adrenals, I am shocked. And you have to look at cortisol 4 times over the same day. And DHA, you've got to look at least once in the morning. And so, and it is best by saliva, second is urine, last is blood.
Really?
And that's
Okay.
where, yeah, that's where a lot of mistakes are made. The blood, even when you have an adrenal disease, Cushing's or Addison's, they actually do a urinary and saliva to determine if you have Cushing's or Addison's disease, which is very rare. I've only had 2 cases of each with thousands and thousands of patients. So don't think you have an adrenal disease. It's very, very rare. So, but stress, absolutely. I don't care if it's mental, I always say it can be emotional or mental or scrolling social media. It can be poor diet. It can be not enough sleep. It can be drinking too much. So it can be physical, mental, psychological, nutritional, biochemical, prescription, vaccines. I mean, there's all these things we're bombarded by. Additives, right? If people are only eating processed food, we have some of the most malnourished people in the world, yet we have availability even for people that are lower income. And it's poor nutrition. So all those things absolutely can change our cortisol and DHEA. So I always tell people if they're not sure where to go around hormones, always test the adrenals first. The only reason I hedge a little bit with women is with the adrenals only. If I don't know their testosterone, then it's a little wonky that I could get it wrong, because when women need DHEA, it directly affects their testosterone. It doesn't with men. So I prefer women. They can start with the adrenals, but if their DHA is really off, I will say I really need your other sex hormones. With men, it's not as complicated. You probably know that. Probably figured out now women are a little more complicated. That's why we have babies. So to our defense, there's a reason we're complicated hormonally, I say. But hormones play a very big impact for men too, So absolutely. But like the commercials make me crazy. They show a man and he, sticks his stomach out and you just need this to lower cortisol. Well, you can have symptoms of bloating, larger abdominal wall, feeling anxiety or have night wakings, and you could have low cortisol. Some of the symptoms can mimic high or low. So always the concern I have is, man, don't take things without knowing, outside of diet or certain changes like that.
Sleep. The new thing now for the last several years is the grind, right? You get all the influencers. Yeah. I get up at 2:45 a.m. and then I'm power reading a book from 2:45 to 3, and then from 3 to 5 I'm working up. Yeah. And when I go to bed at 11 o'clock that night, how important, because it was always you're lazy if you sleep and you only need 6 hours. But now we're hearing studies that no, you do need a full sleep. You're hearing more about the circadian rhythm, the blue light from your phone is how important is sleep for overall health?
I mean, I say it is one of the most vital things. That's one of the common sense things. And getting up at 2 and starting your day, unless you're in a third shift, even there, I say change jobs. Don't do it more than a few years. Because when you look at the circadian cycle, like you said, there's a pattern that our bodies have. And even if you get used to it, let's say you're a surgeon, you're a third shift worker, they show biochemically it ages you. So there's a certain pattern our body follows that detoxifies things and changes things and metabolizes things, and it is based on time. So the average person needs 6 to 8 hours. There are people that need 5. There are people that need 10 or 11. So there are differences. And even that we can look at genetically and probably tell you. Most people know if they're a night owl or not. However, most of the time, that's because of habits and patterns. We're meant to get up when the sun comes up and we're meant to go to bed, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, or sometimes earlier. If someone's a farmer and they live in a certain place, then maybe going to bed at 8 or 9 and getting up at 5. But in the middle of the night, it interrupts the cycle. And they do show that if you are not getting enough sleep, especially, during those night hours, even by 9 is when things start to change metabolically. through 5 a.m. and up to 6 a.m. even, then you're going to interrupt that cycle. And that does put you at higher risk for diabetes, for cancers, for heart disease, and all these other things that go on in your pituitary gland, then melatonin that have to do with light and so on. So I tell people, in the evening, don't be watching TV. Read a book, listen to music, get in the hot tub, take a gentle walk, get off the electronics 1 to 2 hours before, just like eating. Don't eat late at night, hopefully 3 hours, before you go to bed, other than a party here and there or whatever. That's okay again, but if it's a regular basis, again, you're not going to feel as well and you interrupt those natural body processes that we have that are there for a reason.
Yeah, I found an addicting cycle that I had was the later I ate, the more often I got up in the middle of the night and my body was saying, eat more to go back to sleep. And that put on some serious weight. I had a great thought I want to talk about. Environment and instant solutions, i.e. the pharmaceutical company, and answer to your level of comfort.
Sure.
You moved from Chicago to Florida. Mm-hmm. Did you notice any health benefits going from 4 months out of the year, gray and sleet and all this stuff, to sunshine all the time? Did you notice a physical change in how you operated? And then pharmacy seems to offer every solution out there, but I think I'm answering this asking this in general sense.
Sure.
Don't most of our medicines come from plants?
Yeah, they sure do. I mean, what's so interesting is that our environment does impact our life. I mean, I think you can adjust anywhere if you need to, especially if you're happy at your job and your daily life and so on in general. But the environment does impact. We know that when we look at the blue zone or cultures that are coastal, they have better vitamin D levels, they're happier, they tend to weigh less. And part of that I just noticed besides the light is, number one, I'm out in nature every single day. It was very different. I mean, it would be even with our kids' sports outside of soccer and tennis, even tennis, again, you can't do it in the winter, they'd be indoors. But here, everything's outdoors. There almost is not a single day that I'm not outside. That is huge different, probably 4 times a month, in Illinois. So right there, that being in around the light, being around nature, even just things like I've never enjoyed before, like birds. I mean, I sound like an old person now, right? I never thought I'd like birds, but we have eagles that fly by. I mean, osprey that dive for fish. I mean, it just, even when I'm working or even now, I'm looking out at the Gulf. It's just gorgeous, even though it's raining here today. So environment does impact your well-being, and they do show in your coastal areas you have more propensity to eat cleaner, right? Because I can get more wild and fresh seafood. I'm out in the sun more, but not in laying out in the sun, but I'm out in nature with fresh air. It's interesting, like you mentioned here when we're talking about well-being. One of the things I noticed is when COVID hit, I thought my parents were over-exaggerating up north, because we didn't have even our first case here until like June in the town that I live in. So, I mean, things were all chaotic. I thought people were just making things up, because we didn't have that here. I mean, we certainly got hit like everybody else, but just again, because people are outside, we're not cooped up. So it absolutely has made a difference to my overall happiness, my ability to get outside, exercise twice a day sometimes because I go to the gym, but other days I might take a walk or I might ride the bike, or go out on the board. Even on lunch breaks, I'll go out on the board for half an hour. Do you think that's different than eating lunch inside of a dark office? I used to have no windows in my office for, 15 years. So it absolutely makes an impact, and I think, the other thing is, your other question was,
I asked about pharmacy because you did, again, in a presentation you did years ago, the way that you explained it to me was, we talked about multivitamins and how I believe, and obviously correct me, vitamin E was in broccoli, and you had said that here's the sun shines down into the earth and creates a stalk of broccoli, and broccoli's got 8 or 9 components of vitamin E to it. But then a guy who works from Centrum or whatever it is in a white lab coat says, I'm going to take out components 3 and 6, put those in my vitamin, and then leave the rest out. With all of pharmacy, with supplements and whatnot, which seem to advocate through advertising, you and I have said this many times, Americans love advertising. Marketing is what gets us to take things. How much of our overall health problems could be, I don't want to say solved, but improved through the proper food that we eat versus going to the store and spending $50 on this and taking it once a day?
Yeah, I mean, so much. I mean, there's no question. There's a new movie, and I can't think of it. It's by Stanford. It's on Netflix, and they showed in 8 weeks changing diet with lifestyle had an impact on things like even telomeres, which are just markers they look at with aging. And they never thought even 8 weeks would change things that fast. So we have data and studies that show that lifestyle and food absolutely make a positive or negative impact on our physiology, our well-being, our life, our body, all of that. No question. And I think, the problem is that when we look, the body knows what to do with food, of course, unless you completely overeat it or so on, in general. But again, most people aren't going to eat 4 bags of carrots, or even 3, 4 bananas, right? That type of thing. So we're just not going to see that same imbalance. And our bodies have the synergy that when it's in small amounts of the food forms, the body knows what to do with it. It's no difference if you've ever been at a symphony and someone plays out a tune. You hear that, even though you got all these other instruments. But when they're in synergy, it's just this magical vibration that you feel and that you hear and that you feel in your heart and your soul. And it's the same thing with food. Food is so beautiful. I mean, it's just like our bodies. It's amazing of how there's thousands of phytochemicals, let's say in a blueberry, and there's other thousands different ones in a raspberry, yet there's that synergy that help us keep genes and hopefully disease unexpressed, even if we have a genetic propensity for it. So the more whole foods you eat, the more nutrient dense, the more phytonutrients. Everybody focuses on the carbs, protein, and fats, which are very important. They are. We can't get around that because our bodies need that fuel. Just like you can't not put gas in your car because you don't want to. You have to if you want to drive a car, right? So, but you can't put a banana in the car. That's the problem again, is we can abuse our bodies, and it's quite amazing that it keeps working, but how well is it really working? So we're talking about even a lot of different other things. When people say, well, I'm going to go on a reflux medication, let's say when you were having some trouble. And I'd say, well, then I'd recommend that you go to drugs.com or go to that drug website, or just if you're a TV watcher, listen to the side effects. It's not a matter of if, it's probably when. And yet people just tune it out. They get ideas of what to take by an advertisement. And I think it's a slippery slope, that our bodies are made to heal itself. And again, when you need an organ transplant or you're a type 1 diabetic, thank God we have the technology, with insulin and so on. That's a different discussion. The average person doesn't need most of those things. And most people are just, as soon as they have blood pressure, as soon as they have reflux, as soon as they have high cholesterol, they're all put on the same thing. When someone comes to me and you say, Valerie, I'm healthy. I said, okay. And then I do an intake. Well, I've had cancer once. I had reflux really bad. I've been up and down in weight. I'm on, statin medication. I'm on lisinopril, a blood pressure medication. I'm like, and yet you will think you're healthy. And I think we need to ask better questions, because how is that healthy when there's 10 pages of side effects that occur with those medications? And even most medications are meant to be taken short term, just like Advil. It's not meant to be taken 6 weeks in a row. It's meant to be taken once or twice a year when you have a migraine. That's it. And we don't use it that way. So anytime we use things that our body doesn't recognize, I think it's a big red flag. I think we've got to be really careful.
I want to close out with asking for your if somebody just said, listen, I want a crash course in X, Y, and Z, tell me the top 3 things that you can generally advocate that people do to start the change in their lives. I want to do that. So the thing is, I want you to close us out with, what are the top 3 things that you think are the most important for a general sense of people to change their lives through wellness, health, all that. But what I love doing all the time is, and I never get tired of you specifically saying this, is, would you please just discuss the lack of education doctors have in nutrition? I cannot tell you, I grew up with a mother who listened to everything her doctor said. She died obese. She died miserable. She died on more medication than I know what to do with. I, for years, thought that she was just a miserable human being. And then I found out for a decade plus she was on prednisone, which massively changed her personality, but it's because her doctor said, you don't need to eat this. You should eat this. You should be on this. How much education do doctors not get in food? Because I need people to hear this from you.
Yeah, yeah. So it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, is you got to ask the right person the right question. A doctor is trained in surgery and detection of disease and prescribes medication for it. And there is a place for that. If I have strep throat and, I probably need an antibiotic. End of story, right? It's that simple. However, we expect doctors to keep us healthy, and they don't. They do not. Even when you do preventative tests, let's say like a mammogram, right, or a prostate exam, that is detection, not prevention. Because what'll happen is it's fine that year, but the next year there's a problem, and all of a sudden you have to have a biopsy, or they want you to do this or that. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's detection, it's not prevention. So a doctor typically has zero nutrition training, but it's sort of like, to their defense, it's part of the system. They're there for an emergency. In my opinion, if you have a car accident, you don't want to be in Mexico, you want to be in the United States. You have great emergency care for extreme situations. However, a doctor typically never asks any questions on nutrition. We just had this happen with someone I know very well. And they said, oh, you should start exercising. This person exercises 3 hours a day. Didn't ask a single question. What do you think they walked away? I am never going back to the doctor again. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. They should have asked you better questions. They should have asked you questions, not just told you all the things you need to do when you're already doing those. Obviously, there's nothing other than a prescription. They offered 3 prescriptions to solve the problem. That's how they end up coming back to me, is just saying, I don't want to do that. They didn't even ask about, I exercise 3 hours a day. Obviously, that's not an issue. So, you have to ask the right question. So you go to the doctor for certain high-level preventative tests that you can't do on your own if there's a big risk. And you go there for a prescription or for a diagnosis. And even there, when people have a diagnosis, let's just say with the reflux, that you go and maybe you didn't know it was reflux. Let's just pretend you're pretty smart, but let's pretend that you didn't know what reflux was. And you went to the doctor and he said, well, you know what, you need to take this medication. That's it. Did he ask you about your diet? Did he ask if you're eating light? Did he ask if you're laying down? When did it start? What does it feel like? All those questions. So if someone doesn't ask you a lot of questions, there's a problem. And the other thing is, you've got to ask the right person the right question. It's example, I absolutely consider myself an expert in hormones. I ran a compounding pharmacy. I worked in a specialist building. I gave in services to gynecologists and endocrinologists. I've had over 20,000 patients, way more than that now, that I've tested for hormones. But am I a gynecologist? No, I'm not going to deliver your baby. I'm not going to do an exam on you. So there's a place for that, So you've got to go to the right person for the right question. If you're trying to stay healthy, the doctor is not it. Because even when your cholesterol is too high, they're just going to offer you a medication. So we want to be smart that if you're offered a medication, look it up. The second thing is ask, are there other things I can do? And if they don't know, you find someone like me that can, so that you have a choice. And Dominic, if someone says, you know what, I am not going to change my diet. I want to eat candy and cookies for breakfast every morning, and I know I'm diabetic, then I say, then take the medication. Then don't complain when you lose a leg or when your kidney stops functioning. But when you're ready, if you want to do something different, then I'm always here for you.
Let's close this out. Number one, the website is nutritionconnectionbalance.com. The social media is NCB Health on Instagram. You can find it connecting with Valerie there as well too. Top 3 things, the instant 3 things that you think people should do to change their general direction in life to improving health and wellness. What would those be?
Okay. Number 1 is you've got to exercise. If you're doing nothing, you can barely walk. Then again, you need to get some supervision, but, then get on a stationary bike, then walk. If you're asking me if there's even one exercise to do, any exercise is better than nothing. But if you're 40 and older, you've got to strength train. I mean, strength train 3 times a week, 20 minutes to start, because how it affects insulin sensitivity, muscle maintenance, bones, tissues, empowerment, balance. I could go on and on. Hormone levels, testosterone, everything. So absolutely some form of exercise every day, preferably, and start somewhere. If you're very ill, of course, get some direction. Or, for example, when my dad was very ill, I said, the doctor said, get on the exercise bike 30 minutes. And he could barely walk. Finally, it was just first helping him get on and off it. Then it was, okay, 1 minute. Then a week later, 3 minutes, 3 times a day. By a month or two, he's able to do 30 minutes, not altogether still. But, we have to do things in steps. So number one is absolutely some level of activity, most days, every day. And if you're over 40 and you really want to have better health, you've got to strength train. So that's one. I don't care if it's machines, if it's push-ups and things like that, or if it's with free weights. All right. That's by far number one. Number two is absolutely start looking at food labels. And if you don't want to look at food labels, you don't want to learn, then don't eat anything in a package. Don't eat processed food. Then eat fruits, vegetables, and lean protein. Even an egg, okay, there's a package, but it's just eggs, right? Even chicken, it's just chicken, right? Again, versus if you get frozen chicken or a combination meal, we just had someone that was in our home and brought something in. And I was like, God, there were like 70 ingredients for a chicken roll. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I wouldn't feed this to my animals. You know what I mean? It's like, no way. I don't care how good it tastes. If you're going to bake at home, bake real. If I make brownies, I use olive oil. If I make cookies, I use butter. Again, it's still, what goes into it, just like you said with the bread. So less processed food, more healthy. Third thing I would say is make one step to individualize something. If you're having trouble with something, genetically you have trouble with something, there's a symptom, or you're really worried about heart disease. Let's say everyone in your family died of some kind of heart event or has a heart event before 50. For goodness sake, then make one of your goals to know what to do about that and start doing something about that with some kind of individual testing so that and learn more about the biochemistry of your own body. So I would say those are probably my top three things. I'd like to put happiness and some other joyful things in there, but I'll stick with the things that are very practical for people.
People would have to move to the Sunshine State for that, because we're not happy out here in the Midwest where that's at. This was great. I appreciate your time. I can keep talking, and the wealth of information and value that Valerie has is insane. You can check out again as well too. Nutrition Connection Balance. You have YouTube channel. There's the volume of information on there. It's incredible, all the way from diabetes information, cancer information. It's a library. You need to go there and check that out. NCB Health on Instagram, Nutrition Connection Balance on .com, and that's that. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this. This was the first conversations here on the Rants of Izzo show on Spreely Media. For everything else on Spreely, go to Spreely.com. We have the social media site that's fully free speech. You will not be censored. There's all the other shows out there, from like the Burn Pit podcast, Report and Opine, the Don't Unfriend Me show. Austin Peterson wakes you up every morning. Shannon Joy, everybody on there. And of course, our show, The Rants of Izzo, Monday through Friday, live here at 1 p.m. Eastern. Have a great damn day. We'll see you guys in the next episode. And as always, go do something nice for somebody. Help them. And if you can't help them, just don't hurt them. We'll see you guys later on.